G'day. I'm stepping down from my role as spokesperson for the Ratepayers Association, or the Working Party as it's come to be known, partly because of health reasons. I was going to continue through till at least the end of the year, but I feel that I'm no longer able to do that. Plus, I think the group needs to be led by somebody with more moderate views. I think by me heading up the process, it's prevented people from signing up that would otherwise be interested. It's an important step for the Gmelin community because the Ratepayers Association can feed into community development in the absence of a community development officer or a full-time one. And it can also act as a watchdog to ensure that the governance of the area meets with certain minimum community expectations. I'm hoping Margaret Rolls will take on the position in the new year, although I'm aware that she's already been experiencing some unwelcome pressures. Over the time that I've been doing this, I've collected a fair bit of information that people have sent to me. Now, my intention is to hang on to that information. If you want me to pass it on to Margaret, things that you've sent in, just let me know, otherwise I won't pass anything on. Likewise, in the event of my death, the information will be passed on to senior political journalist Andrew Clennell, not because he's a senior political journalist as such, but he's my next of kin, and he's getting that and the stamp collection and all the other stuff other people probably don't want. And if you don't want that to happen, please let me know as well, and I can organise for that. Andrew's been very good. He volunteered to help us out screening any press releases. As probably a lot of you are aware, Michael Sinclair Jones of the 2J Herald has kindly offered a regular space in that publication for Gmelin Ratepayer news. We haven't taken it up as yet. I haven't had time to look at that, but that's an avenue that the group can take. While I'm able, I'll funnel through any releases through Andrew. He can run past it and have a look at it first. Now, I've got a number of issues I want to cover in this video. I'm sorry if it's a bit long, but I feel that I'm at the stage where I can't make any more videos, so I'm going to try and cover everything here. Firstly, there was a rumour going around that I was threatened with defamation action as a result of the letter that I sent to the council with regards to what we think is conflict of interest. This isn't true. What happened is Barry contacted me via email with a paraphrased version of what they thought was said. I don't agree with that. And frustratingly enough, I couldn't circulate it to the members that would express concerns to me, because he asked that I not disseminate the information in any way, or I may be subject to defamation laws. So that's what it was. I found it a bit frustrating because I thought what we put to the council had been bent out of shape. All I'd done is collated a number of concerns people had put to me, and I'd cobbled them together the best I could and passed that on to the council. There's no intention of levelling any misconduct allegations at the CEO. If I were to allege misconduct, I'd actually write the word misconduct and send it to one of the two agencies that handle misconduct. They're professionals that handle it day in, day out. I certainly wouldn't run something like that past the local council people. I mean, as good as they are, they're not equipped to handle that sort of situation. I'm very disappointed about how all that played out, and I'm annoyed that Peter felt that he had to miss the Christmas party that he'd organised. That shouldn't have happened. As for the decision handed down unanimously by council, we don't agree with it. Our position is that the guidelines talk about a perception that there shouldn't be a perceived conflict of interest, and we believe in this case that there is a perceived conflict of interest. I'll give an example to illustrate. Say if the ranger impounds your pet llama and you don't agree with the decision, even if you can muster up the courage to go through a dispute process and go and see the CEO about it, a lot of people would be thinking that all he's going to do is go, well, yes, I concur with the ranger on this issue. And he might do that, and he might be quite right in doing that. But there's always going to be a question in people's minds about it because of a perceived conflict of interest. The last thing I want to say about this is I'm more than a little concerned that the ranger kept asking me and at least one other person, and tried to contact other people, asking for a list of names of people that were involved in bringing up this issue. I didn't give out any names, and why are names necessary? Surely the issue is more important than the names. And what happens to the names? Do they go in a database? Do they get paid a visit? What goes on after that? Next thing I'd like to discuss is the firebreak policy. A few years ago I was in the CRC with a recording studio client, and Barry walked in. He started talking to the ladies working there. At the time there was Loretta Johnson, Abby Forward, I don't know her maiden name. She was not married at the time. I was behind a barrier using a computer with a fellow from Queensland called Bruce Bell. Barry said that he'd come up with this great idea that the Bushfire Act could be used to make sure everybody in town was keeping their yards tidy. He also said that he liked the idea, he was quite a fan of the idea, and that not everybody would like his ideas. Well, I do and I don't. I think the good thing about it is that towns never look better, like everybody's keeping everything nice and neat because they're very scared. And also it's probably marginally safer from a fire safety point of view, yeah, I concede that. The trouble is, when you think about it, nobody really wants to have weeds in their yard, especially weeds are in such a state that contribute to like a fire disaster. Nobody wants that. So essentially the policy is aimed at the weak, the old, the sick, the mentally ill, those with substance abuse issues, and people like myself that forever, of whatever reason, they're ratepayers, but they can't regularly attend their property. In my particular instance, I've paid $1,500 this year on gardeners. I've also just shelled out an additional $1,000 to get some trees removed adjacent to my house that actually were a fire hazard. And I feel that I'm not able to financially contribute any more for this purpose this year. And I know that there's been some late rains and some weeds may pop up. But I figured if I get sent a work order and subsequent infringement notices, well, so be it. So I found out later that this wasn't actually Barry's idea. There's a state mandate that allows this to happen, but it certainly his agenda, and I don't think he'd deny that. There's actually a similar thing in place where in Carnarvon, where I am at the moment. Only the instruction is that weeds need to be kept less than 4 centimetres, so not the generous 6 centimetres that we're given in Gamelling. The only difference is between Gamelling and Carnarvon is they don't have somebody running around taking photos on a continual basis. Now, I'll just go through a few specific issues that I have with the policy. One, it isn't real. In other words, the Shire fire safety policy does not exhibit the characteristics of a bona fide fire safety policy. For a start, if you're looking at fire breaks, you maybe look at first dealing with the people who actually have fire breaks. being farmers. Now, as most of you would know, fire breaks haven't been looked at in the area for a couple of years now. Like, you can drive around, and before I came up to Carnarvon, I had been recording footage over the last couple of years of instances where fire breaks are bicycle thin or non-existent and quite overgrown. When I say quite overgrown, I'm talking about over 6 centimetres of vegetation in some places. And some are quite good. Like, if you drive around, there's some people looking after them. Also, there's no other fire safety precautions and policies in place. It's really just people driving around town, checking townspeople's yards. Have you done your fire break? I mean, traditionally fire breaks were really there to provide access to emergency vehicles. And in a town situation, that's what streets are for. We've got plenty of streets, we've got plenty of dunny cart trails, lots of places where they can access. The other thing, there's no other initiatives in place, so there's no, they don't check lightning rods on old buildings that use that system. Like newer buildings have lightning protection built in, but the older buildings don't. There's no mention of situations where hedges are touching, like on my rental property until recently. Properties on both sides had overhanging trees that were touching my trees. If it actually was a fire break, there should be some demarcation between the properties, but they're not looking at that, they're looking at what's in your backyard. Lots of old properties around, no checking of the electrical wiring. A lot that don't have electrical wiring that's compliant to 2021 standards. The other thing is there's no signs anywhere. If you go to any other town and go to any of these parking areas that are, say, 10 k's out of most towns where overnight people stop or whatever, there's usually like a no campfire sign or indications when campfires can't be lit from October through to March, but we've got nothing like that. There is actually one, I must confess, there's one out at Oak Park. It's rusty sign, like it looks like it's an artefact from the 1970s, but there is one there, but nowhere else. A bit concerning too, because if you go, can't remember what it's called now, but the place on the Gamelling 2J road that's 10 k's out with the concrete pads and the drop toilet there, there's often signs of campfires there, and campfires during the months where there shouldn't be campfires. I would think that a shire that was so heavily invested in fire safety protection would at least have signs up in these places. The second issue I have is that whatever policies there are for fire safety, that they need to be fairly and impartially administered, not just for some people some of the time. I'll put up this graphic now that I got under the Freedom of Information Act. Okay, the first thing that you'll notice is, despite being in spreadsheet form, none of the columns add up, and the amount of infringements issued seems suspiciously low compared to other shires of comparable sizes. I've been charged for 5 hours labour for this, albeit at a discount rate. 2 hours from Peter, 2 hours from Gloria, and an hour from Natalie, who is the Freedom of Information Officer, that presumably signed off on this even though the columns don't add up. Barry says that I should be happy with the standard of freedom of information, so I presume that he's seen it at some stage. Let's just have a look at the fire break offences, because that's what we're talking about now. It seems that 2019 was the only year that they've actually fined people over fire breaks. $772 for a total of 8 offences. The numbers in brackets are offences. Now, I was fined during this time $250, and I'm aware somebody else that was fined $250. His name is Des Van Wensveen, and he's given me permission to say his name in this video. So the total fines between me and Des were $500. The other 6 infringements must have been $272 in total. So it just makes me wonder if there was a fair and a impartial approach, because the fines weren't equal. Coincidentally, Des and myself had both put in letters. His letter was unanswered, and perhaps it did. I've seen that perhaps it didn't need an answer. My letter was unanswered. We put in letters questioning the firebreak policy. I was actually fined for not complying with a work order. This was early December. I went up to the property concern, which is my rental property, and filmed it, which you're seeing now, a bit of footage there. Now, you've got to ask yourself, is this fair and impartial treatment? See, what you see there is a block that's been clearly slashed and the cuttings removed, and what you can see here are some wildflowers that have popped up after some unseasonal late rains, similar to what we've had this year. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the plant. It's not a native plant, but it is classed a wildflower, and if it was on the other side of the fence, I wouldn't be allowed to pick it. As you notice, it's all green, it's not dried out, and I just wonder how this is so much worse than any of the uncleared fire breaks I've seen surrounding the town in the last couple of years, that this would actually cause a fire or spread a fire. The other couple of issues I have with the firebreak policy are more what you would call administrative things. The third point is the infringements are not being issued in the form prescribed by the Bushfire Act. Now, not prescribed by the Bushfire Act, that's a legal term, but basically all these acts where you do receive infringements under, they give guidelines, strict guidelines on how the infringements must be issued. In the case of the Bushfire Act, they need to issue infringements of $5,000. It's not up to $5,000. The Act clearly states $5,000. I'm not saying I wanted an infringement for $5,000. It's just that this is a 70-year-old Act that is clearly being repurposed and used in a way that it was not originally designed. It was for big properties, it was for proper fire breaks, for farmers and people with huge properties that could probably afford huge fines, like $5,000. So the fines aren't being issued legally. At a $250 infringement point, we're looking at something that is a large enough amount of money to keep the peasants in line, but not large enough that people are going to kick up so much that you're going to read about it in the news or see it on television. The last admin point is that there seems to be no line of provenance between the infringement and the inspection. We've only got one person doing the inspections. It's not two like you find in typical police type situations, or even the Jehovah's Witnesses come round in pairs. And to my knowledge, the same person issues you with work orders and letters, so there's no arm's length treatment going on here. There's no actual proof that any work orders are ever issued, and the Shire use the work order as the first part in an enforcement process. So you may or may not have seen, they send out a standard letter with a photograph of the property on to the person saying they've got 14 days or 7 days or whatever to attend the property and do something about it. I never received a work order for this property, and it was pointed out to me that they don't really have to issue me with a work order. They can just send me an infringement, which I know that's true because I've read the Act. But there needs to be a fair and equitable treatment, like I mentioned in point 2. So if they're going to do that to me, they have to do that to everybody, not just me. When I received my infringement, I asked under the Freedom of Information Act for the photograph that they used at the top for that inspection for the work order that I was supposedly not complying with, and to date no photographs being furnished by the Shire. So the one person does the inspection, the one person sends out the letter. So what would normally happen, say, in a federal government process is that if an agency was sending out letters to start off like a legal process, they would perhaps get two people to go to a JP and witness the fact that the letters were being sent out, so that there's proof, empirical proof, that a letter was actually sent out. In this case, we've only got the one officer doing it and the CEO supposedly signing off on these things. In the last few months, I've done my best to try and help the community with some problems that have been talked about, and I'm in the position where I can't really do any more, but at least you've got some more tools than you have had in the past. I've started a Ratepayers general interest Facebook group. I've created the GoomerRates.com website to disseminate information, and have provided an anonymous forum which people can use to discuss areas of concern. I've set up a Twitter handle. Don't discount the power of Twitter. Some years ago I helped out an old lady who had a problem with Barclays Bank. She couldn't close her account. They wouldn't let her close her account. They kept sending her standard letters asking for more information, and she provided as much information as she could to identify herself, but they wouldn't let her close the account. So I sent out a couple of tweets, and they got retweeted 80,000 times, and they ended up closing the account, and they gave her what they call bonuses, but it looked like hush money to me. But anyway, you can use Twitter to help solve lots of problems. I've set up direct links to agencies on the website where people can report bad behaviour from the Shire and councillors. Mind you, only report bad behaviour, don't report... If you receive good behaviour from Shire staff, what I recommend you do is send in a letter to the Shire praising that staff member and saying why they did a great job, because if they ever have to apply for another job, there's been quite a lot of turnover in the last couple of years, so people are applying for other jobs that work there. This will help them. They can use it in conjunction with CV and references to sort of bolster up their case for customer service skills. On the web page I've listed 4 agencies. The Public Sector Commission, that's for minor misconduct, so a little bad thing, but it has to be considerably, having said that, it has to be considerably bad. It's the Corruption and Crimes Commission, which that's for like a big bad thing, and you'd want to have pretty good proof before approaching them. The Ombudsman, the WA Ombudsman, and there's the Department of Local Government, which you can report bad behaviour by council. So you get a bit of a choice there. Some of the agencies offer anonymous reporting, although I'd imagine that they give the report more weight if you leave details. And if you leave details, you also will get some sort of response from these agencies. Some of you might have already written to these agencies and perhaps got a standard letter back telling you not to worry about it or whatever, and you might be disappointed by that. But how these agencies tend to work is they build up profiles, so perhaps if you make a complaint about a staff interaction that you've had, what they will try and do is they'll try and refer it back to the originating Shire and work out the problem internally. So if you've had problems with a Goomerling Shire staff member, what they'll possibly do is contact the CEO via a phone call or in writing, in email probably. And he may say, I concur with the Shire staff's decision in this matter, or whatever. And that's not necessarily the end of it though. Like I said, they build profiles, and if something happens too often, like every time a complaint's made, the needle gets pushed a little, and after a while things reach a tipping point, and what ends up happening is a couple of blokes with black suits come out in the Commonwealth car and start going through every piece of paper and email that's in the Shire. And we really don't want that to happen, but these mechanisms are there so people can be protected from bad behaviour. Being more than one agency available gives you a choice too. For instance, somebody I've been speaking to recently about animal issues has a relative that is a high-ranking member of the Corruption and Crimes Commission, so that person would naturally choose one of the other agencies to avoid a situation that's called a conflict of interest. If you don't want to complain to those agencies, you can send something to me still. I will keep everything under wraps unless you say so. I won't give your name to anybody. I don't want any more unsubstantiated reports of people luring animals off your property. I don't really think this happens. I think there's some people being a little bit paranoid, but if you're really worried about stuff like that, what I suggest you do is get something like this. There's a number of people that make this sort of thing. I think this one's called the Blink XT2. You can just have it outside. It's like Wi-Fi, it runs off batteries, or you can hook it up with lithium batteries inside and a solar panel, and it'll permanently record stuff, infrared, in the dark, sound or whatever. So you can have that around your property so you can really see what's going on all the time. On the subject of cameras and filming things, if you ever have an encounter with like a Shire officer or anybody really that's belligerent and rude to you, what you should do is pull out the phone and film and just let them know, I'm filming this for the public record, and keep a hold of the film or send it to one of the agencies if it's really bad, if it's something really bad, or send it to me. Likewise, if you get like a nasty chest-beating email of Shire staff, that's probably something that's not serious enough to complain to an agency about, but certainly it's something that I'd be interested in hearing about, because we're really aiming to maintain a high standard of public service in the area. So I've also set up a press contact with the 2J Herald, which we've not used yet, but the option's there. You can have a regular column and you can have it vetted by a world-class journalist that I'll send the releases to before they get sent to the Herald. I've got a childhood lawyer friend that's just moved up here. I'm trying to convince him to write a regular blog for the website offering advice on ratepayer issues and answering simple questions that people post on the blog, and maybe some sort of discount for people in the Ratepayer group. Still got to sort out that with him. I've also accessed $20,000 out of my super as per the COVID regulations last year that I'm going to make available in like a trust. My lawyer friend's going to help me set up the trust just in case the group needs it for a class action, which people have said to me, oh, that sounds horrible, Adam. Yeah, well, it is horrible. It's not really nice, but hopefully it'll never need to be used. It's just something that I feel needs to be there to make sure that we can move forward as a community and that everybody is treated fairly. Also, I've set up a case studies database to look at anomalies in Shire business practices, decisions and rulings. What's an example of an anomaly? On the 23rd of October 2019, a ranger accessed my rental property and took these photos. I won't show you all of it, half a dozen or more. No, the 23rd because it's in the ranger's handwriting on the back. The date. Now, there's no lost dogs in the photos, being the 23rd of October. It's 8 days before firebreak policy starts, so I don't really know why the ranger would need access to my property. I later heard from the CEO who said that he authorised this. I don't really understand why anybody would authorise it and why anybody would admit in writing that they authorised it, but he did. I was only like 500 metres from the Shire office at the time. If they could have rung me, I would have taken them up there if they really wanted to see the property. They don't have to access it without my knowledge. I've got nothing to hide. I'm quite happy for people to go through, but I just want to know why this photo's taken and kept in Shire records, and what other photos have they got of my property and other people's properties that have been accessed for unknown reasons. By the way, on that 23rd of October, I did lodge a complaint earlier that day about the ranger, and I I question the fire break policy as well. So I don't know if the two events were connected. But anyway, that's an anomaly. If you've got anything like that, I'd really like to know about it. So that's about it. Over the last few months, I've tried to do everything I possibly can to help out with some of the problems around town. Now, what are you going to do?